My dear husband, his lawyer smirked across the courtroom, built her entire life. Without him, she'd be nothing more than a secretary with a dream. That's why he deserves her fortune. The gallery chuckled. My aunt whispered loud enough for me to hear. She was always lucky, not smart. Their voices pressed against me like a storm. I sat still, hands folded in my lap, my pulse hammering louder than the gavel that had just struck silence. Hi everyone, my name is Claire Weston, I'm 32. And if you think you know what betrayal feels like, wait until you watch your own husband turn your life into a stage play for vultures. I had built my company from a single desk in my parents' garage, wires tangled like my sleepless nights, contracts stacked higher than my courage. Yet here he was, my husband, my supposed partner, painting himself as my savior. Your Honor, his lawyer continued, we are demanding $9.5 million in immediate settlement, half her company shares, and the deed to her parents' ranch. Because none of this, he pointed directly at me, would exist without him. The room shifted. Reporters scribbled. My parents sat 2 rows back, their faces drained, like soil stripped of its harvest. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father's jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth grind. Inside me, a whisper begged, don't cry. Don't give them the satisfaction. I remembered every night I stayed awake sketching logos, every bank that slammed its door in my face, every no that fueled my stubborn yes. He wasn't there. He was asleep in our bed, dreaming while I hustled contracts by streetlight. But truth doesn't always win in court. Power, money, and lies often speak louder. As his attorney paraded fabricated spreadsheets across the oak bench, I felt the weight of silence pressing into me. They thought I was cornered. They thought the ranch, the company, my blood-earned life was slipping through my fingers. And yet, beneath my palm in my leather folder, truth waited, heavy, undeniable, breathing like a hidden flame. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Weston, do you have a response? I lifted my head slowly, the courtroom lights flickering against my eyes. My voice came out low, steady, sharpened by months of betrayal. Not so fast. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My husband's smirk faltered for the first time, though he quickly forced it back, lips curling like a mask glued too tightly. His lawyer adjusted his tie, feigning amusement. Mrs. Weston, the judge prompted, his tone even, but I caught the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. I placed the leather folder on the table, my hands deliberately slow. I wanted them to feel the weight of every second, the ticking silence louder than any accusation. When I finally unlatched the brass clasp, my husband leaned forward, his eyes darting like a gambler watching dice roll. Inside were pages I had collected quietly, carefully, bank statements, forged invoices, and records of wire transfers he thought I'd never see. They weren't just lies. They were proof of betrayal so deep it bled into every corner of my life. You claim you built my life, I said, my voice calm, though inside my chest 1,000 storms collided. But these papers show the money you siphoned from my accounts to fund vacations, gambling nights, and women who didn't wear my ring. The gallery stirred. A reporter's pen snapped. My father finally exhaled, his shoulders sinking into the wooden bench behind him. My mother's eyes lifted, wet but burning. My husband shot up from his seat. That's a lie. His voice cracked, too sharp, too loud. The kind of protest that carried guilt like a stench. The judge raised a hand. Mr. Weston, sit down. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I had spent too many years pretending not to see. Too many nights excusing late arrivals, vague explanations, and unexplained charges. You wanted my company, my parents' ranch, and $9.5 million, I continued. But what you built wasn't my life, it was your own collapse. And now, I slid the top page forward, letting the judge see the first signature of a private investigator. It's documented. The silence afterward was heavier than any gavel. And in that stillness, for the first time, I saw fear flicker in my husband's eyes. The judge's brows tightened as he scanned the first page. His fingers traced the ink slowly, as though the truth needed to be absorbed in careful strokes. The courtroom, once buzzing with quiet gossip, fell into a hushed reverence. My husband's lawyer cleared his throat, feigning control. Your Honor, these documents, surely we cannot admit unverified evidence. But the judge silenced him with a single glance. "We'll decide that after review. Proceed, Mrs. Weston." I drew another page from the folder. "Here," I said, sliding it forward, "are the withdrawal slips. Dates aligning perfectly with his supposed business expenses. And here," I laid down photographs, grainy but unmistakable, my husband laughing in casino lounges, arms slung around women whose names I would never know. Each dollar he claims he invested in me? It was gambled away, spent on anyone but me. The gasp that followed was louder this time. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. Even my mother, who had sat frozen for weeks, whispered under her breath, "My God." I steadied myself, because this wasn't just about money. It was about years of silence I had endured. The nights when he came home smelling of perfume I didn't own. The excuses I swallowed to keep the peace. The way he looked at me not as a partner, but as an investment he believed he could cash out. "Mrs. Weston," the judge said, his voice sharper now, "are you alleging fraud?" I met his gaze, unblinking. "I'm not alleging, Your Honor. I'm proving it." My husband slammed his fist on the table, papers scattering like wounded birds. "She's making this up. This is her revenge because she knows without me she'd be." I cut him off, my voice low, unshaken. "Without you, I'd still be me. The only difference is now everyone else finally knows it too." The gallery erupted. Some murmured in disbelief, others in approval. The judge raised his gavel, striking for order, but even the echoing wood couldn't erase the tremor in the air. Because the tide was shifting, and he could feel it slipping from his grasp. The judge motioned for quiet, but the room still throbbed with murmurs. My husband sat rigid, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles blanched. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but he shrugged him off, eyes fixed on me with a rage that could ignite stone. I placed another sheet forward. "These," I said, "are loan applications he filed in my name. Forged signatures, false collateral, all tied to my company. If I hadn't intercepted them, I'd be drowning in debts I never created." The judge's eyes sharpened. "Forgery?" "Yes, Your Honor." I didn't blink. "And I have handwriting analysis attached to confirm it." The lawyer sprang up. "This is outrageous. These claims are manufactured." "Sit down," the judge snapped, his gavel cracking against the bench. "We'll let the documents speak." The sound echoed like thunder, and in that silence, I allowed myself a breath. A small one, steady and measured, because victory wasn't guaranteed, not yet. But cracks had formed in the wall he built around his lies. I remembered the first time I caught him. A late-night call, his voice too soft, too intimate. I confronted him, and he laughed. "You're imagining things, Claire. You'd be nothing without me." His words became chains. Chains I carried, dragging through boardrooms and family dinners, until I nearly believed him. Now, under fluorescent courtroom lights, those chains shattered one by one. My husband leaned forward, his voice sharp, almost pleading. "Claire, think about us. About our marriage. Everything we built together." I met his gaze, cold but calm. "You didn't build with me. You built on me. And you thought I'd never find the cracks." A hush swept over the gallery, the kind that makes people lean in, waiting for the next blow. The judge leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "This is no longer a simple divorce settlement," he said, his tone deliberate. "This edges toward criminal conduct." My husband's face drained of color. For the first time, he didn't look like a victor or a villain. He looked cornered. And I wasn't finished yet. The courtroom's air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Reporters scribbled frantically, their pens scratching as though they feared missing a single word. My husband shifted in his seat, sweat pooling along his hairline despite the chill of the air conditioning. I opened the next section of my folder. My hands didn't shake. They couldn't. "These are email correspondences," I said evenly, "between my husband and a broker overseas. They detail his plan to liquidate company shares he never legally owned, and funnel them through accounts hidden under shell names." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Do you have verification of these accounts?" "Yes." I laid down the stamped affidavit from the investigator. The paper landed like a hammer. A strangled sound escaped my husband's throat. He lunged forward, snatching at the papers, but the bailiff moved swiftly, pinning his hand back to the table. The image burned itself into me, the man who once whispered vows into my ear now restrained like a cornered thief. My mother's tears spilled freely, but this time they weren't from despair. My father's jaw unclenched, his gaze fixed on me with something closer to pride than I had ever seen. For years, they had watched me suffer in silence. Now they watched me fight. I inhaled slowly, letting the silence build before I spoke again. Your Honor, my husband claimed he deserved my fortune. That he built my life. But this, I gestured to the stack of evidence, is the architecture he built: lies, theft, and betrayal. His lawyer, visibly rattled, whispered, "We request a recess." The judge shook his head. Denied. We proceed. My husband slumped back in his chair, his eyes bloodshot, darting between me and the folder he could no longer control. For the first time in years, the power had shifted. And he knew it. But what none of them knew, what not even my parents suspected, was that the final piece of evidence, still tucked safely at the bottom of my folder, would tear apart every last illusion he had left. The final piece of evidence weighed heavy in my folder, like a secret begging for release. But timing mattered. I let the tension stretch, the silence growing taut, until even the judge leaned forward ever so slightly, as if drawn by gravity. My husband, I said, letting each word land with precision, wanted half my company and my parents' ranch. But what he never accounted for is that his greed leaves fingerprints. I pulled out the sealed envelope and slid it across the polished wood. Inside this are transcripts of recorded calls between him and his mistress, calls where he not only admits to forging my name but brags about how he'll walk away rich while I collapse under the pressure. The judge opened the envelope, scanning the neatly typed transcripts. His expression darkened with every line. The silence became suffocating, punctuated only by the soft hum of the fluorescent lights above. My husband erupted, his voice desperate. She planted those. She's framing me. The judge's gavel cracked. Enough. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. Because I had heard those calls myself, replayed in the quiet hours of the night until every syllable etched itself into my bones. His laughter had once been my comfort. Now it was evidence. The gallery buzzed, whispers swirling like restless bees. One phrase repeated again and again: "She has him." My father leaned forward, gripping the bench as if steadying himself against a tide. My mother's hands covered her mouth, but through her tears, her eyes shone with a strength I hadn't seen since childhood. My husband sank lower in his chair, his shoulders hunched. The bravado that once filled every room he entered was gone, replaced with a hollow, frantic glare. The judge placed the transcripts on the bench, his voice steady but laced with authority. "Mr. Weston, these documents paint a damning picture. You will answer for this." I sat back, inhaling slowly. For the first time in years, my chest expanded without chains. But I wasn't done yet. The last page in my folder wasn't just proof. It was the nail in the coffin. I reached into the folder one final time, fingertips brushing against the last page. It felt colder than paper should, like it carried the weight of every sleepless night I had endured. "Your Honor," I said, sliding it across, "this is a notarized confession. Not mine. His." The judge's brows lifted as he scanned the page. My husband's face drained of color. He knew exactly what it was before the ink even registered in the judge's eyes. Months earlier, when his arrogance outweighed his caution, he had drunkenly dictated a letter to his mistress, bragging about how he had orchestrated everything, how he would take my company, liquidate the assets, and sell the ranch to cover his debts. He signed it, confident she would never betray him. But she did. And now her testimony was stapled to the confession. Gasps filled the room. Reporters' pens scratched furiously. My aunt muttered a prayer under her breath. My husband lurched forward, voice breaking. "That letter is fake, she's lying. She's only doing this because Claire poisoned her against me." The judge didn't even look at him. He kept reading, his lips tightening with each line. When he finally set the paper down, his gaze was steel. "Mr. Weston, this document corroborates every piece of evidence your wife has presented today." I watched as my husband's mask shattered. The man who once strutted into every room with his chest puffed out now sat crumbling, his hands trembling against the table. For years, I had bent myself into silence, afraid to disturb the illusion of our marriage. But illusions don't last under light, and the courtroom lights were merciless. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Weston, do you wish to add anything further?" I let the silence breathe, savoring the moment. My voice, when it came, was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. My husband thought betrayal could bury me. But betrayal doesn't bury, it reveals. And today, it revealed him. The gallery erupted, half in shock, half in applause, as the gavel struck for order. The end was no longer approaching. It had arrived. The gavel's echo faded, but its weight lingered in the courtroom like a closing chapter. My husband sat motionless, his eyes hollow, his skin pale as though the walls themselves had swallowed him. For the first time in our marriage, he had no words left to twist, no mask left to wear. The judge's voice was firm, decisive. "Given the overwhelming evidence of fraud, forgery, and attempted theft, this court not only denies your claims, Mr. Weston, but refers the matter for criminal investigation." Gasps cut through the gallery. My husband's head snapped toward me, desperation clawing at his features. "Claire, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. We can start over." Once, those words would have undone me. Once, I would have clung to the fantasy that love could mend betrayal. But now, his pleas sounded like echoes in an empty hall. I rose slowly, smoothing my blazer with steady hands. I met his eyes one last time, not with anger, not with pity, just clarity. "You didn't lose me today. You lost yourself. And now the world knows it too." The bailiff stepped forward, guiding him away. His shoulders sagged, his fight extinguished. Watching him leave in cuffs was not victory, it was truth finally spoken aloud. My parents stood, their presence like a shelter at my back. My mother touched my arm, whispering, "You did it." My father nodded once, his silence carrying more pride than 1,000 words. As I gathered my folder, I realized it wasn't the evidence that freed me. It was the courage to bring it into the light. Outside, the autumn air was sharp, carrying the scent of leaves breaking free from their branches. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing, questions flying. I didn't need to answer them. My story was already written across every page, every whisper, every silence that had filled that courtroom. And in that crisp air, for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Justice wasn't loud. It didn't roar. It settled softly, like dust after a storm, reminding me that survival is its own kind of victory. My life was mine again,